Hello, everyone. It's Ashley Maltz of West Holistic Medicine and the founder of Austin Wellness Collaborative. I'm here with Mollie Williams. She is of parsleyandpumpkins.com, which is the cutest name. I love it. It's very cute. So we are doing our Corona series. It's Monday, March 30th, and we are really hoping to get information out to all the people at home, as well as support our amazing Austin Wellness Collaborative members who may see, some people are seeing a downturn in their entrepreneurial businesses. So everyone's mostly self-employed, and so therefore if you want to give a donation for their time and offerings, great, and Mollie can tell us how to do that if she's open to it. Each person is different. So that being said, as a collaborative, we are still making a donation every month to the Austin Health Commons, which is a nonprofit to bring health and wellness to along all racial spectrums and all everything, anything that could be a label to kind of break down those labels and what divides us and bring us together in terms of health and equity. So without further ado, I will let Mollie take the lead. She's going to teach us how to make a really awesome salad with everything you just have at home.
Yay, I'm excited.
Yeah.
This isn't like a traditional parasympathetic thing, like, meditation and relaxing and all of that, but getting into the flow in the kitchen can definitely trigger that parasympathetic mode. And this is a good time to get some new ideas for things to make. So I'm excited to share this.
Yes, it seems like a good time because people, may not be able to go out to the grocery store because they're working from home and have the kids, and, there's coronavirus, otherwise also, so they may just have to use whatever they have, and B, you just have some people have a little more space to get more creative and even maybe involve the kids in making salad.
Yes, and I have an idea at the very end of the mini class. I have some ideas on how to implement these ideas, and one of them would be perfect if you have kids at home or like just husband, like someone that you want to get involved in the kitchen who doesn't actually want to cook themselves. There's a fun little game that I can teach you that's super fun to play.
Yay, awesome.
Cool.
All right.
So I'll go ahead and share my screen.
Do you want to tell us about your business and who you are and what you offer, just so we get that out of the way?
So I'm Mollie. I'm a nutritional therapy practitioner. I basically do health coaching one-on-one with people. My specialty is in hormonal health and menstrual cycle issues and fertility, and how all of that relates back to just the health of the body and getting the body healthy as possible, and then those issues resolve themselves. So I am here in Austin, but I work online. So I have clients kind of in Austin and all over the country, which is super fun. I got into making salads and healthy eating from the farmers markets here in Austin, really. I think I have a slide. I'll share a little bit about that, but we have such access to diverse foods here in Austin from our farmers markets that, like, anything that you want, you can pretty much get year round. And the farmers markets are still open even during coronavirus and the quarantine, because they're considered, an essential service for people to get good, healthy, fresh produce. So this is a really good chance to explore some new ingredients, some new flavors and things that, you might just not have. You might not have had time. And now we've got plenty of time. You can go to the farmer's market. They're still open, see what's in season, and make something really delicious. So let's go ahead and jump in. Oh, and you can find me at parsleyandpumpkins.com if you want to check that out, and Instagram, parsleypumpkins, because adding in the "and" was too long. Okay, let's go ahead and share. Okay, awesome, and I can still see the video, so that's good. Okay, So this webinar is based off of a course that I sell called Build a Better Salad. It is an 11-day class, just short little video, a little video each day, and then a lesson or activity to really learn some of the concepts of flavor and texture and how to think through the different ingredients that you have on hand and figure out how to combine them. I've really found with myself and with my clients that when you are reliant on recipes from other people, it's difficult to make this kind of lifestyle last month after month, year after year for the rest of our lives. We need to be able to come home at the end of the day, see what is in the kitchen, and make something really satisfying and delicious. And I have found, for me, salads are that thing. So I'm really excited to share this with you. So I've kind of taken that 11-day class and just condensed it down into a short little lesson, which I think is super appropriate for coronavirus, because what is still available at our grocery stores? I'm sure most of us have gone grocery shopping at least once or twice since all of this started. There are shelves that are empty. Like if you're trying to get some dry beans, you can't. There's nothing on the shelves. The canned goods, it's hard to find stuff. But at least in my grocery store and everyone else I've talked to here in Austin and in different parts of the country, the one thing that is still available in all these grocery stores is fresh produce. Everyone's produce section looks pretty much exactly the same. There's like a couple little things that might be missing. Like I couldn't find red onions at the grocery store yesterday. But aside from, you know, these little one-off things that they might be out of or just having a hard time sourcing, there is still a ton of fresh produce available. And I have really found that salads are the perfect way to showcase the flavor and diversity of fresh produce. Salads are just, they're made for it, whether it's cooked or raw, or you're adding in a combination of things. There is so much that you can do with fresh produce. So this is a really good time to play around with these ideas. Now, I have found from talking with lots and lots of people about salads over the years that most people think salads are boring, that they have no flavor, and that they're not filling, right? Like this little clip art picture of this woman standing in front of a plate of lettuce, so sad. This is like the epitome picture of diet culture, where you are using a plate of lettuce to basically starve yourself skinny, which we all know it does not work. It's not a healthy way to take care of yourself. It's not going to get you where you want to be. But that is most people's association with salads, right? So they kind of have the wrong focus. Most people look at lettuce only, or, you know, the traditional salad that's like iceberg lettuce, some mealy, bland tomatoes, and maybe some cucumbers, right?
Yeah.
And like Heinz salad cream.
I don't like that at all.
It's gross. They also think of salads just as a side dish, which it's a great side dish, but expanding your perception of what it can be really helpful. And then a lot of people have just one or two recipes that they go to for salads, and just haven't really expanded beyond that, haven't been exposed to other ways to create them. Most of us did not grow up with parents making a whole bunch of like different varieties of amazing salads. So we're not really exposed to that. But what I've found is a much better focus. Salads are a really great way to be seasonal. Whatever you have available to you, whether it's whatever's available at your grocery store or whatever your farmers are growing at the farmer's market, you can find a way to showcase that in a salad really beautifully. You also get a lot of diversity with salads because it's not just one ingredient, right? Like a lot of people eating a sad diet have pasta and bread as kind of their main staple. There's only a couple of things you can do with that. You put some sauce on a pasta and maybe add meat, and that's kind of it. But with a salad, you have this huge framework that you can play with, adding tons and tons of different ingredients, and then a huge diversity in the flavors and textures that you can play around with. Salads can also be really flexible. Like if you want to do just cooked things during the winter, if you want to do just raw, fresh things in the summer, you have unlimited flexibility in how you approach this one pretty simple meal. And salads can also be very filling. This is it just comes down to like skill and knowing what things to add in. I found most people who find salads to not be filling, that they don't like it as a meal, is they just aren't thinking about the ingredients in a way that can facilitate an actual meal versus a side dish. Very easy to fix. So this class is really geared to help you tap into your own creativity when it comes to creating things that work with what you have on hand, with what you like to eat, and with how you're feeling in the moment, right? The problem with other people's recipes is that other people created them. They might not be what you're particularly in the mood for. They might not be ingredients you have on hand. And so learning to focus your own creativity can really help you get what you want when you want it. Like that is the absolute benefit of knowing how to cook, is you get to eat what you want when you want to eat it. So I'm also going to teach you a 4-step system, just a little framework that you can take everything I'm going to teach in this class and implement it really quickly so that you'll know instantly how to use any ingredient. Like whatever you have in your kitchen, be it a spice, a vegetable, a fruit, whatever it is, you will have a framework to figure out how to best use that in a meal that's going to be delicious and satisfying, so that you can make hearty, filling, satisfying salads. And if you have family, you can make filling, delicious salads for them too. You take these same principles that we're going to learn, have some good conversations with your family about flavors and textures that they like, learn about their preferences, and then you can use this framework to create things that your whole family is going to enjoy. So I'm Molly. I did a little intro in the beginning. I created this class because salads really were my gateway to eating healthy. I did kind of a 180 flip 5-6 years ago. I was not very healthy back then. I was a pretty heavy drinker. I was a smoker. I did not exercise. I was eating a sad diet. And I thought that I was pretty healthy because I didn't have any major, diseases or health problems. And all of the packaged food I was buying said it was healthy, right? There's a little heart healthy sticker on all of my food boxes. But I kind of had a moment where I realized I really was not as healthy as I thought I was. And if I wanted to have children in the future and have this life that I was envisioning, I needed to change some things. And so I started shopping at the farmer's market here in Austin, and almost overnight went from a highly processed food, I mean, we ate at McDonald's, the whole shebang, to almost completely local, seasonal, fresh food from the farmer's market. And salads were really the way that I was able to do that. It was way easier to get a lot more veggies. There's a focus on local and seasonal food. There was a focus on simplicity. A lot of processed food have these very, they're hyper palatable, right? We're all familiar with that. Fresh food is not hyper palatable, and it really makes you focus on the simplicity of each ingredient and making something really delicious that's really quite simple. It doesn't have to be, this huge, complicated meal. Really simple food can sometimes be the most delicious. And then salads for me were also a really reliable way to transition into this kind of life, because I could use just whatever I had on hand, whatever I found at the farmer's market. I was able to use this one meal framework as a way to come up with something healthy to eat, no matter what was going on. And I didn't have to spend hours and hours searching for other people's recipes and trying to make them work for what I wanted. So we are going to cover a couple things in this class. We're going to talk about why we want to eat, why people want to eat. It really comes down to flavor. We're going to talk about why we love to eat, which is texture. We're going to talk about different layers of a salad so that you can get much more satisfaction and really make something filling and satisfying. And then we're going to talk about a 4-step system for quick implementation. So you can basically take the principles from this class and later tonight or whenever you are ready to make something, turn this into reality in your own kitchen. So why we want to eat, we're going to talk about the 6 types of flavor. So flavor really is the language of nutrition. Our bodies have certain needs, and I have found that cravings and flavors and desire is one of the ways that our body is able to communicate to us what it wants, right? We have this amazing brain that can think, but we don't know really what's going on in our bodies. We do not have verbal communication with our livers or our intestines to know what our bodies want. But we get these weird inklings. We get cravings, we get desires, we just randomly really want some peanut butter. Flavor really is the language of nutrition. There are nutrients, right, in chemical compounds. We all know food is just made up of fats and carbs and proteins and different nutrients, and they're all chemically bound. That's what makes our food. And our brain perceives those chemicals as flavors, right? So we're eating something, you bite into a fresh strawberry, you get this immediate strawberry flavor, right? Nothing else tastes like a strawberry except for a strawberry. And our brains immediately perceive the nutrients that are in that food. And so when we're eating very consistently just real food, we're not doing all this processed stuff, right? You're eating strawberries, not strawberry flavored candy. Our brain is able to use that as a very pure language to communicate what it wants. And food manufacturers do understand this. Like they know this in a way that most people do not. And it's one of the ways that they make food so hyper palatable and so hyper desirable, is that they understand that our bodies use flavor as a language of nutrition. We are programmed to want highly flavorful foods because it means that there is dense nutrition in those foods, until processed food came in, and then that just went right out the window. So if you think about a tortilla chip, and if you haven't read the book, The Dorito Effect, I highly recommend it. It's also a really fun book to recommend to clients or people that you work with. It's an easy read. It's very interesting, a lot of great stories. And they talked about the development of the Dorito. Basically, somebody went to a Mexican restaurant. They had some tortilla chips. They thought these are super delicious, very salty, right? Our brains are programmed to desire salt. And then they thought, what if we make a tortilla chip that tastes like a taco? And so they reverse engineer all the flavors of a taco, add this into a powder, and coat the tortilla chips. And then suddenly you have this super hyper palatable food that our brain is thinking there's going to be all of this nutrition with it. Right? If you're eating whole foods, if you bite into a real taco, you are getting proteins from the meat, you're getting good fats from the avocado, from the cheese, you are getting carbs from the salsa and the lettuce or cabbage, whatever you add in. There is a ton of real nutrients in real food. And so you bite into a Dorito and our brains get those same signals. This is why we are so hardwired to desire intense flavor. And so you can kind of use this to understand your own desires a little bit better and your own body a little bit better. Real food has real flavor for a reason. When you're eating real whole foods, more flavor means more nutrient diversity. If you have a more flavor in a real whole food dish, it means you're adding lots of different ingredients, you're adding a lot of spices and herbs. There's a lot of stuff going into that. And so you legitimately are getting more nutrient diversity when you are focusing on getting all of these amazing flavors in your meals. So the trick to creating really great flavor combinations on your own without recipes is not about following particular rules. It's just about understanding the different roles each flavor plays in a dish, how they interact with one another, and then just letting your own senses and creativity guide you for what sounds good. Really, like what your cravings are will guide you towards a really delicious dish. So we're going to talk about 3 categories of flavor. We're going to talk about dominant flavors, enhancing flavors, and intriguing flavors. And I find these ideas a really easy way to remember what the different flavors are doing. So our 2 dominant flavors are sweet and umami. So this is a kind of sweet and savory. Umami is that flavor of mushrooms, of ground beef. It's this of soy sauce. It's that not quite salty, but very rich, deep flavor. That's the flavor of umami. So, and of course, you all know the flavor of sweet. I don't need to describe that one. So dominant flavors provide a framework that you can showcase other flavors. They also create balance when they're used together. So a really good example is a caprese salad. Super, super simple. It's mozzarella, tomatoes, and basil. That is it. You can get fancy and add some balsamic if you want, but those 3 things make an incredible dish. And it's the umami flavors of the tomato that really create that foundation for this to work as a standalone dish. If you had just mozzarella and basil, the basil would completely overpower the mozzarella and you would really only taste that. But when you add in this umami-ness of the tomato, and of course you're getting a little bit of salty in there. There's no food only has one flavor. So we're kind of talking about each food's most dominant flavor. But by adding all 3 of those together, you create the tomato kind of bolsters up that very subtle flavor of the mozzarella, and it also grounds that really pungent flavor of the basil. So all 3 of those can actually shine when they're combined in a way that they don't if it's just 1 or 2 things or by themselves. Another great example for sweet as a base is beets, right? Adding in sweet beets or any kind of sweet food can provide a backdrop to play around with very highly pungent and sour flavors that otherwise would totally overpower a dish. But adding in a little bit of sweetness can really ground those intense flavors. So things like radishes, Kalamata olives, fermented onions, these foods that are very, very strong, adding in something sweet can actually ground those in a way that makes the whole dish work and nothing overpowers each other. So our enhancing flavors are salty and sour. So particularly salt intensifies and sour brightens. And using these 2 flavors can make such a difference in a meal. This is the difference between kind of basic home cooking and what professionals do, right? Is understanding these little things that just brighten up ingredients or really enhance the flavor. So for example, salt, Alton Brown has this great quote that salt makes food taste more like itself. And it really does. And an avocado is a great example. If you have just a plain avocado, it has some flavor, but it's very subtle. It's difficult to eat a lot of plain avocado, but suddenly you add a little bit of salt and it becomes even more avocado-y somehow, and it's easier to eat. Salt, so there's a couple of ways you can use this in a dish. Most professional chefs will tell you to salt or season each ingredient separately and combine them together. This is especially useful when you're cooking food. So if you're going to cook a certain aspect and then add it to your salad later, like you're roasting sweet potatoes, you want to be salting each of those things separately to enhance that ingredient's natural flavor, so that when you do combine them, each thing is shining at its most optimum. And then of course, you can also use salty ingredients in your food. In particular for people here in Austin, Central Market has a area of their fresh produce that's like a little salad bar thing, not their salad bar, but in the produce section where you can get like bulk lettuce. And sometimes they have sea beans that are a sea vegetable, but they're very salty, they're crunchy and crisp. One of the best salad ingredients I have found. I love getting those. And then sour flavors just wake up the whole dish. It brightens everything. So of course, a dash of vinegar. I have found even a dash of vinegar in like cream dressings, cream sauces, just brightens everything up. You can do citrus juice. You can also do ingredients like pomegranates, pickles, sauerkraut, other kinds of olives, fermented foods, anything with that sour flavor can help to brighten up all of the other ingredients so that everything shines. And then our last category is intriguing flavors. So these are bitter and pungent. Pungent is kind of everything else, right? If it's not salty, sweet, umami, bitter, we're gonna put it in pungent. So these two categories add depth and complexity to the dish. When you eat something and you pause and think about like, what is that? What is that flavor that I'm getting? And you're trying to place it, almost always that is a bitter or a pungent flavor that you're trying to figure out. The secret ingredient of most recipes is either bitter or pungent. So adding these is really helpful. So combining these with other flavors, bitter ingredients can add in a lot of health benefits and add character and dimension to a dish. Bitter is a really interesting flavor because most chemical compounds have a bitter flavor, and they can either be toxic, so poisons can be very, very bitter, there's some interesting studies that children have a much more sensitive gauge on bitter flavors, which people think is probably a way that they've adapted to avoid accidentally being poisoned, right? Kids put all kinds of stuff in their mouths. And so if they are super sensitive to bitter flavors, they're less likely to eat something outside that could kill them. And so the next time your kid is complaining about broccoli, just remember that they legitimately have a different experience of some of these bitter flavors than we do. We kind of grow out of this. But bitter flavors can also represent really healthy compounds that our body needs. Like I've got a picture of dandelion greens here, very bitter, but very, very good for the body. And adding in those kinds of flavors can add a lot of complexity. And then our pungent flavors, this is like everything else. This is all of your herbs, your spices. This is garlic, turmeric, ginger, mint. This is all of that. And so that's a huge category. So you can kind of further divide this into cool and warm categories. If cool and warm doesn't make sense for you, you can do energizing and cozy. But these are the flavors that make you think. They are the flavors that are kind of on their own, right? They're not salty, they're not sour. Like the flavor of mustard is uniquely the flavor of mustard. You can't really get that from, well, mustard greens. But right, they share those similar compounds. So you can use these pungent ingredients to really create a lot of variety with the same ingredients over and over again. So for example, in the winter months, when our farmer's market has basically the same vegetables week after week after week, you can use these pungent flavors to change up the experience of the same dish, right? So you can have the same salad. I've got a picture here. It looks like there's some steak or maybe mushrooms, there's some shrimp, there's different greens. You could do one version that's cool and energizing. You could do adding in some mint or lemon balm in a vinaigrette. You could take the same base ingredients and do these warm, cozy flavors by doing like a cinnamon chipotle aioli. Very different experiences of the same main ingredients. So the next thing we want to talk about is why we love to eat, right? Flavor is why we want to, why we have this intrinsic human just desire to eat food and why we get these cravings. But texture is why we love to eat. This is why people are like, I don't care if I'm celiac, I'm going to keep eating pasta. It's these textures that are so deeply ingrained with our desires and with our emotions. And understanding these textures and how that works can really help you make something uniquely satisfying for how you're feeling in the moment. It's a lot of fun to play around with these ideas. There are deep biological and physiological connections between our outer experience of eating, so like chewing, that mouth feel, and the inner experience of being nourished. They have done some really interesting studies on people who are in the hospital and being fed intravenously. They are hungry even though they're being nourished. Like on paper, technically, they are receiving all of the nutrients that they need, but they don't have that experience of eating, and so they still feel hungry. It's that deeply ingrained. They even did a really interesting experiment with rats. I'll have to find the copy. I can send it to you if you want. But they basically took two groups of rats. On one of them, they gave them completely tasteless, bland food. So it was, you know, technically proteins, fats, and carbs, but they removed as much flavor as completely possible and fed it to the rats. And again, technically on paper, they were receiving all of the nutrients that they needed to be healthy. But after a short period of time, those rats actually died, and they don't really understand why. But there is a fundamental connection between being nourished and eating food. We are programmed to do it. So there are 3 categories of texture that humans strongly desire. Of course, there are other textures, but like gritty, nobody wants that. So crunchy, chewy, and creamy. These are the things that humans want. We crave these, we need these. I actually had someone comment on a post on my Instagram yesterday. I was asking about what ingredients they had on hand, something like that. And she said she has to have something crunchy. She doesn't feel like she has eaten until she's had something crunchy. People really do have that deep connection with it. And what's interesting about crunchy is that food manufacturers know this, and they actually have special equipment that they use to measure the crunch of a potato chip and optimize the crunch. Like they get all scientific about how can we get the most satisfying crunch possible out of every single potato chip in that bag. And we have a response to that. We love that crunch, right? And food manufacturers know that. And so I think it's important that we know that too. And knowing when you're craving things like that can help you satisfy your desires in a very healthy way. We're going to talk more about that. So crunchy flavors crunchy textures go very well with energetic emotion. So this can be positive energetic emotions, like when you're really enthusiastic, when you're playful, right? If you think about kids outside playing and running around, they want something crunchy. They want like a celery stick, right? Like if you ever were going to crave a celery stick, playing Capture the Flag is probably when. But it also works with anxious or nervous energetic emotions. So people who are always like, you're really stressed at work, you're under a deadline, you're going back to the vending machine over and over again for that bag of chips. The physical chewing and crunching helps to release some of that energy. So pay attention to when you're craving crunchy things, and you might just find some really interesting correlations between how you're feeling and what you are desiring. And when you're paying attention to that, you can use that to create a very healthy meal that's going to satisfy you on that much deeper level. So chewy textures, these are satisfaction. This is how we feel full, how we experience satiety. This is also the difference between a side dish and a real meal, right? That process of chewing. For one, it takes longer to chew things, right? So it's not a snack, it's much more of a meal. You need to sit down, give yourself a second to chew your food. Those in our NTP training, for those of you who are NTPs or who have worked with one, we teach that digestion starts in the brain. It starts with seeing your food, smelling it, chewing. It's a very important part of our body understanding that we are about to have a meal. We need to get into that parasympathetic state and get ready to digest and process those nutrients. So adding in chewy foods on purpose can be a really simple way to help yourself feel full and convert just a very simple side salad into an actual meal where you don't just feel satisfied because you're chewing, but you're actually getting nutrients, right? Chewy foods are dense. They've got a lot in them. They've got a lot of the proteins, the fats, the carbs. There's stuff in there that we need to digest. So there's a reason that it takes longer. And then creamy textures, these are decadent. They are luxurious, right? Most, like, if you think about the most decadent dessert, it's probably got a lot of creamy textures. And it's also deeply comforting. So the very first food that a human experiences is milk, right? Whether you're breastfed or you get formula, it's creamy, it's sugary, and we have a very deep connection with creaminess, the texture, and feeling comforting, right? If you think about a cold winter day, sitting down to a hot bowl of creamy tomato soup, there is deep comfort in that. If you think about most comfort foods, it's mashed potatoes, it's macaroni and cheese, it's those very creamy textures. And so you can use that to your advantage. Something like this, coronavirus, where we're all stuck at home, we don't really know what's going on. Playing with these textures, the chewiness to really feel satisfied, the crunchiness to get out some of that nervous tension, and then the creaminess to just help us feel comforted and safe and secure is very powerful. And you can get that just from a very simple salad. So now that we know kind of the flavors and the textures, there are 4 layers to a salad. There's the base, variety, toppings, and dressing. You don't always need all of these, but I find it very helpful to think about ingredients in these different terms so that you make sure the finished product is actually a real meal and not just like a plate of lettuce. So your base is your literal foundation. It creates continuity, right? Every bite of your salad is going to have your base ingredient. It's a really great way to get those bitter flavors, to get bitter greens, or to get some chewiness. You can add in, if you do like a grain salad, if you eat grains or your clients do, even doing a combination of some lettuce and some bulgur or quinoa can be a really great base. Your variety ingredients are the mass and the substance, right? Like this is the physical bulk of your salad versus toppings, which are just a little sprinkling. It's just something to add a little burst of flavor. Your toppings can still be the star of your dish. It can add that burst of flavor that makes people go, oh my gosh, this is amazing. But it's not substantial, right? Your variety ingredients, those are where you're gonna get the bulk of the meal. Toppings just add a little burst of flavor and texture. They can also enhance presentation, which is completely valid. It doesn't matter if something like, you know, just a little something to make it pretty, absolutely worthwhile, right? You deserve to have beautiful food that you want to sit down and eat. And then your dressing. So The dressing actually plays a really important role in your salad. You can get that creamy texture from it. You can legit like add some good nutrients. You can get a lot of good healthy fats just by rotating out the different oils you'd use, doing some sunflower oil, some walnut oil, pistachio oil. You can get all kinds of stuff. And it also creates continuity, right? You're going to mix it in. So every bite is going to have this continuity of flavors. And a fun thing is that your dressing can also be used to fix flavors. So a good example of this, a few years ago for, what's that holiday? St. Patrick's Day. I did a corned beef at home. It was the first time I had made one. Way too salty. It was like almost inedible, too salty. And so I turned it into a salad. I shredded up some of the corned beef. I did a simple, I think I did a cabbage base, right? Corned beef and cabbage. And then used a creamy dressing with almost no salt in it to counterbalance that. And it worked really well. So you can also use the dressing as a way to if your other ingredients have gone a little too far to one side, you can use that dressing as an after way to fix some of those flavors if they've gone a little bit off course. Okay, so we are going to talk about the 4-step system for quick implementation. So this is essentially the thought process that you can use to go through what you have on hand and figure out how you're going to use these ideas to actually create a meal, right? So you're going to first choose your starting ingredient. This can be anything. It doesn't have to be the most substantial part. It doesn't have to be the largest part. This can be a spice. You could say, I want to make a salad with turmeric and start with that. So this could be just something you want to play with. It could be whatever you have on hand, right? I have a jar of garbanzo beans. There's my starting ingredient, right? So just pick something. And then you're going to evaluate the flavor, right? So you think about what is the starting ingredient? What flavor category does it fit in, right? So if it's turmeric, this is a pungent flavor. It's a warm flavor. And then think about, where do you want to take that? Do you want to go very umami? Do you want to go sweet, right? Those dominant flavors, which way do you want to go? So I've kind of got some pictures going. If we start with apples as our starting ingredient, maybe we want to go sweet. And so we're going to add in some beets for that really sweet, but also kind of umami, kind of earthy flavor, right? Some roasted beets, there's a little bit of umami in there. And then you're going to evaluate texture, right? So what are you feeling? Are you super energetic? Are you like totally exhausted at the end of the day? Do you want something creamy and decadent and just comforting? Or do you want something like, it's the middle of the day and I'm going to go on a dog walk in 30 minutes and I want something crunchy, right? You can play around with your desires that way. So in our example, we'll go with jicama, which is totally still at the grocery store, a really fun ingredient to kind of play around with. So we've got our apples, our beets, our jicama. So you're going to evaluate the texture and then you just fill in the layers, right? So what base do you want? Do you want something, do you want some grains, some lettuce? Do you want to fill in the variety? Add some toppings. So we've got a picture of a beet salad here with like some nuts on top. Add some nutrients, right? Real food. The variety of flavor increases the variety of nutrients that you're getting. And it just looks beautiful. And there's nothing wrong with having food that just looks beautiful. So now you have the flavors, you have the textures, you know how they relate to your physiological desires, to your cravings. You have a system for analyzing what you have on hand and how you're going to think through those ingredients. So go forth and create. So there are 2 ways that you can do this. So you can first think about what needs to be used up, right? So if you if your spouse came home on the first day of COVID quarantine with like 3 cases of garbanzo beans, how can you use some garbanzo beans up? Whatever you have on hand, start with that. You can also do a family mystery box challenge. I keep seeing people doing memes about the TV show Chopped. if you haven't watched it, it's basically some chefs come in, they're given ingredients, and they're like the most ridiculous things ever. Like you have sardines, marshmallows, and olives. Go. And they have to just make something ridiculous. And so if you have kids at home, if you want to get your spouse involved, if you've got roommates, you could even do this virtually with your friends, like have somebody pick out your starting ingredients and then make something with it. It's a lot of fun, and it's definitely a challenge, and it just makes it playful, right? So if you create something and it's a total bust, it's still going to be funny and a lot of fun, and you've learned a lot about those ingredients and the flavors that maybe didn't work out together. But most likely you will create something that is delicious that you never would have put together unless someone had challenged you in this way. So it's a lot of fun.
That's such a good idea, specifically for bored kids at home right now. And, if they're old enough to chop and use their knives and use the oven and things like that. I wouldn't do this with young kids, but that's a really cool idea. I like that.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. And even little kids, you can do the heavy lifting for them and do the chopping, but have them tell you what to do, right? So they can decide, you can ask them like, okay, we've got a butternut squash. Think about the last time you ate that butternut squash. What does it taste like? What do you think would go good with it? And just let them think through, and then you can do the roasting and the chopping and all of that. It's a fun game to play. And I found actually doing that game with my husband was really helpful when we were transitioning from processed food to whole foods, because I learned about his preferences and what he liked and what he didn't, and why he didn't like what he didn't like, which was very eye-opening. And I actually found a lot of ways that I could just tweak the way that I was cooking it to fix the texture, or just doing it in different ways that he actually did end up liking that ingredient. So these are really great opportunities to have those conversations. Yeah. All right. So that is what I have for you. I have a little offer. I am doing this offer for my audience, and I figured I'd go ahead and add it here if you want to share it for people, or if anyone wants to do this. But I'm combining the Build a Better Salad class, so the online version, with 4-week meal planning that I'll set up for you through Real Plans. And I'm going to do it for $19 because we're in COVID-19 quarantine. I think that's fun. I hope people don't think that's offensive. I thought it was funny.
No, I don't think, no, we're all getting creative with a little totally humor. Actually humor is very healing, and it activates good endorphins. So I think that's cute.
I think it's super fun. So yeah, if anyone wants to, if these are like new concepts, or if you have a family member that you're like, you need to do this, you need to learn this stuff. The Build a Better Salad class is essentially these concepts. So I teach the flavor, texture, the different layers. We go more in depth into it. But what's fun is each day you have an activity that you go and do with that lesson. So it could be something about the equipment, right? Going through your pantry and seeing like what different ways do you have of processing vegetables that you haven't thought of before? Like what equipment do you have available? It could be going through your recipes and looking at different flavors. So it kind of takes these ideas and just puts them into a little daily activity so that you can kind of play around with these in a little bit more structure. Anyone who likes homework, this is perfect.
So awesome, Molly. Thank you. I learned so much. Like I thought I knew a lot about nutrition and food and eating, but you forget how the different textures and flavors, and there's a million different options you can do. Like I'm a pretty boring, like I just kind of more utility wise for food, although I love flavor and texture. And you're reminding me that I love jicama, the crunch and this kind of moisture that it brings when it's not too dry. And I learned a lot. I'm really impressed. So thank you so much for sharing. I think it's helpful for people who are stuck at home, and they especially with kids around like going crazy, I think it would be good to get them in the kitchen. They can learn, these are life skills that they'll learn for the rest of they'll need for the rest of their lives. So thank you
They
so
definitely
much.
are. And we don't always think about our food in this way. So sometimes
Right.
breaking it down into these different ideas just brings a different perspective to something that you might eat every day.
Right, right. So I'm excited to go and learn and, explore a little bit in my kitchen. And yeah, thank you so much. So people can find you online at parsleyandpumpkins.com,
Yes.
and or they can, if they know me and can't find you, can always reach out to me. And we will get this on our social media channels. And thanks again. I
Yeah,
appreciate
you're
it.
so welcome. This was fun.
Yeah, well, hope you, and you're an excellent teacher, by the way.
Thank you.
You're very like bright and articulate, and I like it. So very shiny,
Thanks so
sunshiny.
much. It's a lot of fun. It was fun to convert this little online class into a webinar for this and kind of, approach it in a different way. So I'm appreciative for the opportunity. I wouldn't have done it otherwise without this
There you
little
go.
series. So
Awesome. All right, well, you take care, and I'm gonna stop recording.